I'm ready. Jill, it's Leslie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm ready to go. eScribe is ready.
Okay. Can you rename yourself?
Okay.
I can, I think.
The amended agenda with the correct link is now published on the website.
Thank you.
So ready for me to call the meeting to order?
Jill, it's Leslie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, so live on YouTube. I'm gonna get out of that window then. And we should be good to go. This is January.
Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. My name is Nancy Moe. I'm Vice Chair of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and I call to order the meeting, regular board meeting of Missoula Redevelopment Agency on Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 12 noon. Before introductions, I want to thank everyone for joining our meeting being held via Zoom webinar. When I call for public comment, please use the raise lower hand feature to let me know you wish to be recognized or raise your hand. Our host will allow you to talk and you'll need to unmute your mic. If you have joined us by phone today, you can raise or lower your hand by pressing *9 and mute and unmute using *6. If you are participating by phone, I'll call on you by reading the last 4 digits of your phone number. If you are participating by computer, I'll call the name that was listed when you entered our webinar. The first item on our agenda is introductions. So let's do board members first, please.
Ruth Reinecking, board member.
Melanie Brock, board member.
Okay. And 3 makes a quorum for this board. So let's have the other participants, staff first, please introduce yourselves.
Ellen Buchanan, MRA staff.
Chris Bean, MRA staff.
Gass, MRA staff.
Jill Dunn, MRA staff.
Leslie Pugh, MRA staff.
Is Annette going to join us also?
Evidently not.
Okay. Then other participants, would you please identify yourselves?
Larry Sloan, consultant.
Heather McMillan with Homeward.
William Sloan, L. Sloan Consulting Group.
Is there Allison Siegel?
Allison Siegel, Public Works.
See,
Hi, everybody. Jeremy Keen, Public Works.
Okay.
Now, I see Annette just joined us.
All right. And I see Lori Davidson is here.
Yes, sorry to be a little late.
That's all right. You're just in time. I'll take that as all of the people who are currently participating. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the October 19, 2020 regular board meeting. Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Is there a motion?
I'll move. This is Ruth.
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Is there further discussion? Jill, do we need to wait for discussion on this?
No.
I don't think so, Nancy. I think we're good. Do we want us to wait for public comment on the approval minutes?
All those in favor say aye, please. Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Are there any public comments or announcements on items that are not on our agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the action items. The first action item is on Trinity Apartments, which is in ERD 2. And Chris, please make your presentation.
All right, we'll try to share that screen again. Right. So Trinity Project is a kind of a two-site or multiple site project rolled into one financing scheme. I just wanted to go back for a second in time a little bit and recognize that this is one of really 3 or 4 very large and very impactful housing projects for the city of Missoula that MRA has been able to be involved in, although this one not as much as perhaps the others. I think the thing that identifies them not only is their impact on our local citizenry, but also how complicated the financing has to be. And I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as we go through this, is that and even though MRA participation is not as high as it has been in some of the other projects like Bellagio or the YWCA Family Promise Project, it's still very, very important. So every dollar counts in every one of these things. 2 sites, a little bit closer look. I think that the bigger site is up against West Broadway. West Broadway is the MRA's URD2 or Urban Renewal District 2 boundary. So the west side of the West Broadway right-of-way. The Mullen site is next to the County Detention Center off of Mullen Road. And the site itself was donated by Missoula County. And that was that other public input that we might have been in other projects that actually started to make this whole project come together. The Cooley site is off to the right-hand side of your screen, just south of the Burn Street Bistro, when we were all able to go have fun lunches and breakfast there. And the Burn Street cooperative housing or cooperative food distribution area, and along with some housing projects there. It is a former mobile home site, older mobile homes that were hauled off by a different owner and had a different project in mind and was not able to make that work. So I think maybe it gone through one set of hands again. Homeward purchased that site using some local talent and excellent financing work from Clearwater and a couple of other local entities. The Mullen site, like I say, was donated from the county. And let's see, the Cooley site, we're looking at something relatively dense, still has some green area, but is one of those things that will be impactful. It will be aimed, the residents there will be, the target is for less than 70% of area median income, although the chances are that it will be substantially less. They're calling that kind of a come as you are, low threshold housing, and it will be is sadly needed in that rental range. The Mullen site is really kind of 3 different projects in one. It is 100 units of similar income housing as the Cooley site, less than, somewhere between 30 and 70% of area median income. There's 30 units that are dedicated to long-term unhomed or homeless folks. So, but also termed chronically homeless. And they will have a series of programs associated with their residency there that will help address the reasons that they may be homeless. And they although there are certainly individual reasons for everyone that might be in that situation, there are some groups that they can deal with in terms of mental health, physical health, job training, and a whole host of other things. The third piece of it is probably one of the more exciting things that we've been able to deal with as a city, and that is called the Navigation Center, and that will be on the Mullen Road side of that. That's kind of somewhat separate. It's the lower building that you might see right in here. This is the 30 units. This is 100 units. So that will be kind of an expanded version of what I just described for the 30 units, and will be available to whoever comes in and needs assistance in trying to figure out how to proceed with their lives and move away from the status they're in right now in terms of living on the river and so on. This has been highly successful in other communities around the country in terms of providing a variety of targeted services. The final set of services is still under review. The City of Missoula will be the master lessor of the Navigation Center, and now has is working on an RFP and getting a consultant on board to actually come up with the final set of services that would be most helpful in Missoula and the Western Montana. I think that sort of fits with MRA's objective, not only for doing the right thing for our neighbors and people, but the homeless camps are beginning to expand all over the place, and in areas that they occur, they're sometimes mixed in with criminal activities or people that are pretty unsavory, and those folks are mixed in with families and a lot of folks that aren't necessarily the same. They are scary to the neighborhoods because of that, and certainly impacts the ability for decisions for reinvestment and redevelopment in those neighborhoods. What is being asked for at this point is only within the Second Urban Renewal District, and is in the West Broadway, and therefore is within the West Broadway right-of-way. And that's just sidewalks, curbs, and some drainage. This particular rendering shows the existing conditions on the top, which is a curb and some sidewalk, and the need to put in on the bottom a better drainage system, and come around here with sidewalks and curbs that are compliant with accessibility standards that the city has to meet. Relatively expensive at $52,000. Of that, a very healthy portion is labeled as engineering and design. That also includes a ton of work that has to be done with the Montana Department of Transportation, and the amount of setup that even a small piece of that small area and a relatively short period of time needs to include in terms of rerouting traffic and so on. So that includes the setup for all the mobilization for that and so on. So we're looking at just over $52,000 as far as the request goes. Included in your packet should have been a much more in-depth description of the project, and the folks that are involved with it, which are a partnership between Homeward and the Housing Authority. They are also using Blue Line as their financing and construction management consultant. When I say also, they were also involved with Bellagio.
Great.
I think with that, I think that's a fairly more summary than I thought it would be going into, but Heather McMillan and Lori Davidson are here and know the project much more in depth.
Lori, do you have any comments? No?
Nancy, if you don't mind, I'll add a little bit. Per usual, Chris Dam, we gave you a lot of information, and you did a really good job of synthesizing that. So, and I apologize. We've had a lot of city meetings and process and county commissioners, city, and we've presented this project a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to try to give you guys an overall synthesis, but I would welcome questions as I go, because Chris did a really great job. I'll give you a little bit of history, why we're in a partnership. I think that gives some nice context. I know you all are as worried as we are about the homeless need here in Missoula. And so while we know our project will help, it's not going to solve the whole picture. And so, but it is a component. The YWCA is taking a component, others are taking a component, and the service providers are what are really important to this part of the project. Taking a few steps back, the Cooley site is a component to this project because we are using the low-income housing tax credit program, a 4% bond project. And this is a non-competitive tax credit where about 40% of the project costs get covered with equity. And then we have to find soft financing and loans, mortgages for the rest of it. And so it's complex and every penny counts. And so what happened, over a year ago, we were able to secure the Cooley site, working with the neighborhood. We worked as a group, as a collective when it was for sale. There was a tax credit project that didn't happen. It went back on the market and the neighborhood really wanted to see a project come together. So Homeward worked with partners and we secured the project through a partnership with some private entities that were kind of 20% of the loan, and Clearwater Credit Union is the majority holder on that. Great partners. I give that context because that was our project, Homeward. We would be doing a project kind of standalone. And then Blue Line and Housing Authority were working on this donation with the county and doing this permanent supportive component of homes and the navigation center and some homes on this other parcel. So long story short, we both had enough land and the size of a project that was too big for a 9% low-income housing tax credit competitive ask, because that's easy to fund. It's very competitive, but there's more equity. But it was too small. Both of our projects were too small. And so basically we decided to jump in the raft together and put these projects together and do scattered site. And so that means that Housing Authority and Homeward are owners and developers, and Blue Line is a co-developer with us. And so that project team is critical, and Chris touched on it. Housing Authority has a lot of experience with the particular vouchers that are associated with these 30 homes on the Mullen site. Permanent supportive homes are basically homes with services attached. They're integral to those homes. And for people coming off the street, there's a lot of intensive services, whether it be physical, mental health, all of those components. They're right there in that safe environment. In fact, there's a very clear architectural solution there where you're kept safe and those services are tied there directly. And so that's key to that component of the project. Blue Line has used this model in other parts of the country, but not here. And so Housing Authority has specific with the vouchers. Blue Line's done this before with the low-income housing tax credit, and Homeward does tax credit development as our wheelhouse. But the three of us have been sitting around for years trying to work on this homeless issue. And now by putting those projects together and aggregating them and using all of our strengths, we are able to bring this project to you now for critical funding, as Chris described. I really appreciate that because every penny counts. But also we're just, like I said, we're spending all of our strengths doing some important components. And so the navigation center, the city is taking that on. We are not service providers, but there are amazing service providers in the community. Some things that just rolled out, the mental health component of going out on emergency service responses that just rolled out is really important. That'll save a lot of people going to the ERs and jail inappropriately on emergency responses. So that's one small component of what our service providers are doing here in Missoula. And we're going to we're trying to design a space at the navigation center where those services will evolve, and they will add, hopefully we'll have mental, behavioral, physical, all those components in that navigation center, helping with the assistance with those permanent supportive homes. But it will evolve over time. The service providers, hopefully it will add a component of, it'll make their jobs easier, hopefully, and add capacity versus being a duplication. And so that's why it's a careful articulation and we don't have all the components defined, but it's a very important piece of the overall homeless puzzle. And so the cool part about the low-income housing tax credit program is this is a statute within IRS tax code where we can build these. And so Blue Line brings that experience. So I just wanted to clarify a bit on that. You guys can ask questions as we go. But some of the other pieces with this project is that we're able to utilize income averaging. And so normally our projects are targeted at people making 60% area median income and below. With income averaging, we can go up a little bit. We can open our bandwidth. It's a new IRS statute. And so that's really fun. And on a project of this scale, we're just going to have a bigger bandwidth and be able to serve more Missoulians, which is exciting. Our project team is great. We have Intrinsic out of Bozeman as the architects. They have built over 350 homes with Homeward in different parts of the state. But we're also working with WGM, who has taken on the lion's share of the work with the entitlement. And I will say the reason we're a bit exhausted and I might be going down a few rabbit holes is that careful when you get something donated. The land process on the county donation has been a challenge. And this is what we're asking you guys to help us with today. The county's been great. The donation is incredible. But the problem is when a city grows and it goes from, Broadway and then jumps over to Reserve, there's a lot of land in between that doesn't necessarily get dealt with. And so we're having to add streets and circulation and worry about pedestrian connections. And also it was all one big parcel. And so we are in the process of going through minor subdivision. It's basically just carving the piece of land out for our project. And so what that did was it triggered a whole bunch of other compliance and requirements. And so, which is fine because this has been really great. The city has already committed funds to help us with some of the work on Maple that they already had in their budget. So we're prioritizing some funds there. And then we get over to the little bulb out where you're dealing with MDOT and it's a highway, not a street. And so there's a lot of complexities, but long story short, that what we're asking you guys for today is one small component that's super integral to the overall that was derived out of that subdivision process. And we are doing our best and appreciate the fact that we worked with the city. We worked with MRA staff initially, wanting to make sure that those improvements make sense. So we've got the Department of the Highway guys to agree that we're not going to send fully accessible paths out in the middle of Broadway. We're just going to cross Maple. I mean, these are common sense things, but there's never common sense in bureaucracy at times. So that's what those bulb outs are doing. But we're also knowing that there's going to be a lot of people living on in the property. There's going to be people coming in and out of that navigation center. There's going to be a lot of pedestrian connections from Mullen all the way through onto Maple and up to the bus stops on Broadway. And so this little piece of the project is really important for pedestrian, bicycle, and actually circulation, even dollar rental car. There's long stories we can talk about how we've had to work with them and codify some agreements that were made 30 years ago between the previous owner and the county commissioner. But we're solving a lot of problems with this project and putting in the right infrastructure. And so Jeff is really great, the owner of Dollar. He's done a lot of, he's helped us out a lot. And so we're just working to kind of clean things up over there and make these connectors. And he'll still have an agreement with us that he can access out of his lot and go to Mullen because it's safer instead of pulling out onto Broadway. So there's a lot of really good byproducts from this, from a community standpoint and integration. So there's a lot more I could talk about, and I'd be happy to. And I don't know if Lori wants to add anything as well. But again, just the strength of the partners, I think, is what's most important about this project between Homeward, the Housing Authority, and Blue Line. We're really confident and also the city. I should point out, I've been trying to say this in every meeting. Yesterday, we went through land use and planning in our subdivision first submission of that process. We were approved unanimously and it'll go to consent. But I will say that the city staff have been amazing. They have helped us. We have a very strict timeline due to what's happening out in the tax credit market. We have to close this project, the financing structure, in February of next year, or we go out into what's COVID impact and election impacts. The tax credit market's been volatile, but we were able to lock a financing number, 93 cents on the dollar, which is unheard of right now in the country, just because that's where we are in the world. And so we're very excited that the city helped us through that minor subdivision process, pretty streamlined. So knock on wood, I can say that now because we had the initial approval last night, but we still have a few more hurdles to get over, but everybody's been really great so far. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. It's been a lot of virtual meetings this week on this project. So if I glossed over anything, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, I lost my connection for a bit, but I'm back now. So I'm not sure if board members had a chance to ask questions. Melanie or Ruth, do you have questions?
Did Lori want to jump in? I think Heather was about to pass it over to Lori.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I don't think there's a thing I could add to Heather and Chris's comments here today. I'd just be reiterating the same things. So good job, Heather. Good job, Chris.
And I had questions about the partnership and Blue Line. So Heather, you just totally took care of my questions. But I just want to say this is so exciting. The Navigation Center, every time we see you, Heather and Laura, you're coming up with more innovative ways to solve a problem that we desperately need to solve. So thank you, thank you, thank you for working on this.
Thank you for that. There's nothing simple about this, but I do think it's worth it.
Yes, and I do have to say that Homeward and the Housing Authority have actually been hoping to be able to work together for quite a while, and
Yeah.
the stars aligned, and here we are, and now we're married for like forever.
We have that out loud conversation a lot, don't we, Lori? My analogy on a development project is you don't get into partnership unless you're willing to go on a raft trip together. And so we've had a lot of relationship and long-term drama conversations, and it's been good so far. So I'm thrilled.
Me too.
Ruth?
You had just a quick question about the supportive housing at Mullen.
Mm-hmm. Please.
I don't know if that is primarily aimed at adults or if it includes families.
Well, right now, I mean, I really think, and this is where the very careful slice, and this is where I know enough to be dangerous because I'm not a service provider, but what I do know is that the YWCA's project takes that bandwidth of homeless, because there's a lot of different kind of homeless. Those are the families sleeping on the church floors, with Interfaith Collaborative. They're working together so that their design there for what's being built now will be more conducive to family. At our location, it's more one bedrooms and studios, and more, there may be families, but it's a smaller space and designed for just a different bandwidth of potential users. And we can't predict exactly who, but I think that with both of those projects, we're taking a big bite out of the apple and the need there, but there's still going to need to be more that happens. And Lori, would you add anything to that? I mean, we're being very intentional about that design at this location.
And I would confirm in these 1-bedroom units can very easily accommodate 2 people, perhaps 3 if there's a small child. There are occupancy guidelines that we have to follow, both through city code and also through the regulations that govern the vouchers that we're putting in here, the permanent supportive housing vouchers. But so we won't have large families in these units. And as Heather said, the YWCA's new building is designed to handle those larger families. I would add, though, that at Trinity, or at the Cooley site at Trinity, we have larger bedrooms, 2 and 3 bedrooms. And while they may not necessarily be homeless, those units are also low barrier housing and targeted towards, could very well include people who are homeless.
And I'll add, and this is where you get to correct me, Lori, but the low barrier definition, I mean, people with credit problems, people that have problems renting, and may have some background at a criminal justice system. I mean, there's low barrier means that we're willing to listen and evaluate, and it depends on the condition. So you're right. And we have those larger bedrooms at Cooley that will be beneficial because they're a little bit bigger bedroom mix than we would normally do here in Missoula at one of our typical projects. And so that's a different bandwidth, again, opening on type of homes. And I will say, Lori, your cornerstone in a couple of your projects also cut into those bandwidths in little pieces of homeless options.
Right.
Is that, I mean, maybe you do want to chat a little bit about that.
Sure. So the Cornerstone project is going to be leasing up very shortly. We had our opening last week. Some of you were able to attend that, so thank you for being there. That project is 12 1-bedroom units. It's designed to house people who are homeless, who are most in need, some of the hardest to house. And we will have supportive services available for those residents. Those also are not limited to just one person. It could be two people. It could be even a couple with a small child. The occupancy guidelines do allow that. There's an age limit. They have to be, I think, under 6, if I'm recalling correctly, but please don't quote me on that. So yes, as Heather said, we're dealing with a certain bandwidth here, and have been working with the city all along throughout Cornerstone to make sure that the housing is appropriate for the population that we're targeting. They could be vets, they could be people who are living on the river, they could be, and I will say that if you look at the people who are on the FUSE list, the frequent user list for the city, they are mostly singles. There are some couples or, 2-person households, but most of them are singles. And I'll also add that we were really delighted that you might have seen an article some months ago about a couple who were living on the river in one of the encampments, and they applied at the Palace Apartments that we own and manage, and they are living there now very happily. So we were able to get them through the admissions process quite quickly, get them off of the river. So we anticipate that that's what we'll be doing in both Cornerstone and at Trinity. So,
Ruth, did that answer your question? Yeah.
probably more than you wanted.
Sorry, we talk
I'm
about this
glad to give you
project a
that
lot.
platform because I'm glad to give you that platform because, like Melanie, I have to thank you. I think it's amazing the work that you're doing, not just on this project, but when you add the Cornerstone and Bellagio and all of the prior projects that you've done and all the ones that we've been able to help with, I think this is terrific, and I'm so glad to see that we're making some progress in dealing with the housing situation in Missoula. One of the reasons that I asked about adults versus families, though, was both in the memo that in Chris's memo and in the letter that came with the packet, there was a description of the supportive services that were going to be offered, and there was no educational services for kids that might be going to school. And so I didn't know if that was something that is included or if it's not really anticipated because you're not anticipating any children over the age of 6. So yes, that answers my question. One other comment that I had, when you talk about every dollar being critical to this, I see that you have like a $1.5 million contingency, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's
not. I know.
It's like 3.5%. That does not seem like a lot to me. So I am happy that we can. I am going to vote for this, and I'm hoping that my colleagues do as well, because I think that yes, that is critical, even though it's a large project. And like with the YWCA, when the ratios are so spectacular, I wish there were more that we could do to help.
I appreciate that. And you're right, it scares us to death too. I will say, and Ruth, you know more than enough to be dangerous because you were on our board. We right now, and this I hopefully will help illustrate, and it's good to always say in the public, part of this is that we earn a developer fee, the 3 of us, and we're taking $1 million of the paid developer fee out of what would normally go to our operations and putting it into a reserve to backstop those operations with the navigation center and the permanent supportive homes. And so that's kind of one risk mitigation point from an operational standpoint. The other really cool part that I think you'll love is that we finally, after 8
believer in funding operations, so I'm sorry I interrupted.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was going to say the other cool part, after 18 years at Homeward and basically telling the Department of Commerce that lowest qualified bid is the most economical way to do business, they gave us a waiver on this project. And so we have our general contractor on board right now. And so they're working with our design team, and they've been value engineering and helping with the design of the project. And so and very impactful on how we deliver the project. So we're thrilled to be doing that. And it's still scary on the construction side, and that contingency is still way too small. I totally agree. But we feel a little bit more comfortable with
Wow.
having a GC on board. So that was a big win for the project.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I agree with Mel and Ruth's comments. I do have a question for you, Chris, and that is, this is just work on the intersection. Is there, are the county or the state doing work on Broadway that coordinates with this bit of intersection work, so that might cause them to need to
Redo it.
destroy any of the work that was done to complete what they're going to do? Do you know?
My understanding from the city engineer, which is the third component of all those three, is that the sidewalks out there are relatively new, and there is no water and sewer are unlike the other side, where we had to dig up a whole bunch of things to get water and sewer to the new development directly across the street from what we're talking about right now. Water and sewer is more available on this side, so that it doesn't look like from any infrastructure purpose that there will be disruption in what we newly build. That's no guarantee. That's just their outlook, as it doesn't look like that in their conversations with the various other jurisdictions that there's anything in the offing in the next few years. I did talk to a couple of folks over there about that exact thing, because we've been running into it.
Okay. In the contract, excuse me, and the contractor for the project is going to do this work that MRA might authorize?
Yes, we will incorporate that as part of the work itself. Is required per our subdivision process, minor subdivision process, but also it's actually beneficial that we build the project through our general contractor, because it's a small gain, but any dollars that we spend generate tax credit basis. And so there's a little uptick. Money put in will get a little bit more equity in for the project. So it's a little more bang for the buck when you look at it that way. I would say we work closely with city engineering, and they didn't want to have to do the other side of Maple because that's the undeveloped side. The dollar side is more developed. So we're doing it just enough. The MDOT required that little component to be taken care of. We didn't want to have to rip anything out either. And so engineering was great to work with. And then we just kind of put up with the nominal impact from what MDOT required.
Thank you.
Quickly, just to add on to that, one reason that I didn't actually say Trinity Apartments LLLP in my recommendation is because I think we need one discussion that we haven't had is the final party. Second party will be MRA, and just in case there needs to be, Homer needs to move forward, do this through them rather than through the partnership or whatever. So that's the reason that I mentioned the project rather than the actual entity, because we'll just have to refine that, make sure everybody's happy with how that works out.
Chris and Ellen have trained me on what I can and can't do with MRA funds, and then we complicate your lives by using low income, limited liability, limited partnerships, and how to not taint basis. There's a mechanism. It's going to have to go to us and then into the project. So yeah, sorry about the complications, but
right, as long as we get the houses.
John, I do want to, if I could just take 1 minute to really thank Heather and Ashley at Homeward, who have shepherded this subdivision process through the city. They've done an immense amount of work, and I have been only peripherally involved in that, thank goodness. But they've done a fabulous job. So
thanks, Lori.
Thanks.
And Ashley is on the call, just so you know.
Great.
I would say when it goes back to the partnership question that you were going to ask Melanie, we are using our strengths, and that's where we know entitlement, architect, engineers, but also we know how to manage that piece. And quite honestly, Lori has her hands full on another project that you guys are helping out with. And so we're just sharing capacity. So it's actually been really good. Blue line too.
Are there other questions from board members then? Ellen, did you have something you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, just a comment. You know, my mantra has become, this is probably the most important project we have going on in Missoula, Montana right now. And it just kills me that it's not in an urban renewal district.
I know.
We have more assistance than we're able to be through this. I'm glad we can do a little bit to help out.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would say is that the city staff has really stepped up, created a team that has worked through the complexity of this, worked through it really quickly, development services and engineering and all. Awesome, because this has a timeline that really matters. This project won't,
Yeah.
we don't meet the timelines.
The mathematical impact is millions of dollars if we don't close in February 2021. So that put a fire under our tails especially. And I will say, and I want to go on record, I said it before, development services, God bless them, because we went into a pandemic in the middle of this, and we went home into virtual, and they were half-staffed. And so what happened was, we went to Mary McRae, and we got the assurances from this city because we tried to slice it. Jeremy I've talked to him multiple ways on how we can approach this project, and didn't want to have to do the subdivision. And so we were scared to death about that. And so they've shepherded us through, and we've had a project captain. Mary is training Cassie, who is a newer planner, but she became our kind of champion, and they ran it through every department. If it sat on somebody's desk too long, everybody drank the Kool-Aid early on, but if it sat on somebody's desk too long, it got prompted and moved and kept going. And so WGM, who does this all the time, was shocked how efficient it was. And we also had to say, WGM, don't use your assumptions. Listen to what Mary's telling you to make this one submission. No back and forth between those entities. And so everybody has stepped up across the board. And I can't say that enough. And honestly, I've been on way too many virtual meetings, but we got approved on land use yesterday. But then also the policy piece came through with townhome exemption and subdivision got approved by land use, the recommendations. And so I was on that working group, and we're going to use Trinity as a postmortem. Some of the recommendations by that consultant, we did it at Trinity because of this timeline and because of the nature and the community benefit. And so we'll kind of some of the things that they were talking about for efficiencies and ways for development services to improve, we'll use this as a example of the template and what they can build in systematically. So there's larger impact, and I really wish you guys could put more money into, and we could ask you for more, but we're just on those margins. So thank you for this consideration.
Thank you. Are there other questions from board members? Is there a motion?
Yes,
Ruth?
I would like to make this motion that we approve TIF assistance in an amount of up to $53,255.68 to the Trinity Apartments project, whatever entity that may end up being, for public right-of-way improvements on West Broadway in ERD 2, subject to requests for reimbursement, meeting the standard conditions for all MRA-assisted projects, and authorize the board chair to sign the related development agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Are there further comments? Then Jill, will you please tell us how long we need, when it would be proper for us to, how long we need to wait for comments from anyone else, and when it would be proper for us to vote on the motion?
Well, I'm reading my new instructions, Nancy, and everybody who's allowed to get in, I think they show up as an attendee, and I don't have any new attendees, so probably the same amount of time just to let people get to their computers or their phones. So I think that my handy-old cell phone timer, like I've always used, and we could go a couple minutes.
Thank you.
Joanna, was that Marty in your office showing you the ropes while you're waiting?
Yes, we had several technical difficulties this morning. The city has migrated to Zoom webinar instead of Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to get to the point where we have Zoom rooms. So in the future, when we get back to post-COVID public meetings, there'll be an in-person and virtual component, and those Zoom rooms will be important for that. But
absolutely,
it's a lot of technical stuff, and MRA is the it's the first meeting. So here we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, we butchered it last night at Design Review Board. We had to start late because not all the board members could get in. So I think you guys are in a transition. So thanks.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
Yeah, one has to wonder how Hal Fraser would feel about the Hal Fraser Zoom room.
Right.
That's awesome.
I think he'd be okay with it.
We have about a minute left, Nancy.
Thank you.
He could just grumble like the rest of us when we have technical difficulties. We did really well today. I mean, I've been city council meetings that have been 10, 15, 20 minutes late getting started because we've got yet another new system. Which is why I'm glad we'd only do this once a month. Stress levels are pretty intense from 11 until noon on board meeting day. As Jill
This has been pretty seamless. Good job, you guys.
Yeah, you didn't see us like a quarter till.
You didn't see me last night struggle busing it, so I get it.
When I said, do we need to buy walkie-talkies?
Nancy, that was the timer. So I don't have anybody coming in as an attendee or raising their hand. All I have is Ashley Grant. And I think you said she's your
yep. She was my support and going to text me if I messed anything up.
Thank you, Jill. So the motion is before the board. All those is there further discussion from board members? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The motion passes. Thank you very much. For those of you who are attending for this particular subject, except for MRA staff, of course, you're free to leave.
Thank you so much, you all. We really appreciate it.
And you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is ERD 3 Northern Sidewalk Project. Todd, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll share my screen here so we can look at the map. There we go. Can everybody see that?
I can see it.
Okay. So yeah, we're here making a request today to amend the professional services agreement between MRA and WGM Group regarding the ERD 3 Northern Sidewalk project. So as we were going through the preliminary design phase last year with this project, we determined that there was some overlap between this project and the Brook Street corridor transportation on demand infrastructure study that's currently underway. And in order to not muddy the waters on that infrastructure project, we determined to swap out some parcels on Brook Street and bring in some sidewalk segments that were further to the south. And when the preliminary costs for the project began to take shape, it became apparent that the cost of the project was exceeding more than what MRA was comfortable budgeting for in fiscal year 2020. So we made the decision to split that project into 2 construction phases, and we can spread that construction cost out over a couple of 2 budget cycles. So phase 1 of the project was completed last year. That was involved going around backside of Holiday Village, and then also some parcels over here on Regent Street, these 2 blocks. So that was completed last summer. Phase 2 of the project, I have highlighted here in red. These are the sidewalk segments for phase 2, a piece segment of sidewalk on Kensington in the corner of Kensington and Regent. Half block on the north half of North Avenue. And then we jump down to a segment on Dearborn Avenue. And then 2 long blocks on the south side of Benton Avenue, the 1500 block and the 1600 block of Benton Avenue. So interestingly, what we found as we got into phase 2, some of the design is that the right-of-way width of Benton Avenue between Washburn and Russell is only 30 feet wide. So WGM has been working with this property owner here to acquire an additional 30 feet of public right-of-way so we can place the entire street within public right-of-way. So WGM will finalize and record the right-of-way acquisition and also any other easements required to complete phase 2 of construction. MRA and WGM have negotiated a scope of services and a budget of $56,600 for phase 2 construction. I think this is about right in the pocket of the median cost that we would expect for this phase of construction. Their work will involve finalizing the right-of-way, recording the right-of-way acquisition and easement acquisitions, finalizing the design work. This will take place over these coming winter months, and we're planning on bidding the project probably around late February for construction next summer. And staff is recommending that the board move to approve a budget amendment to the MRA WGM Professional Services Agreement for the URD3 Northern Sidewalk Project Phase 2 in an amount not to exceed $56,600 for final design, right-of-way easement recording, engineering, construction administration, and project closeout. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, are there questions from the board members? Ruth, I can't see your screen, so I don't know if you have a question or not.
No,
Okay,
no question.
all right. Todd, let me ask you about the budget. I see that that our budget still has construction and design open on the budget sheet. Is this part of that, or is this in addition to that?
This would be part of what we have in the MRA budget. I think, are you looking at the FY21 budget?
I guess I'm looking at the status, yeah, the budget status report that was printed on November 13th.
Yeah, I think that's FY20. FY20 came out with your packet today.
Right.
We're still up. I'm not sure I understand the question on that.
Well, this is this an additional authorization, or is this activity included? Is some of this activity included in the budget that we have already approved?
It's included in the FY 2021 budget. So it's in addition, but it's in addition, but we budgeted for it for the coming year. Does that make sense?
So I guess the question, Todd, is did we budget enough, or are we going to add to that budget dollar amount?
We've budgeted enough in the FY 2021 budget. We're actually under budget, I think, on this request here from what we are from the placeholder that we have in the FY 2021 budget.
Okay, I understand that we're recognizing that this is additional work, but it may be covered by funds that are already budgeted.
Correct.
Okay. Are there questions from board members or anyone else on this project, or comments? Is there a motion?
I can move the staff recommendation to approve a budget amendment to the MRA WGM Professional Services Agreement for the URD3 Northern Sidewalk Project Phase 2 in amount not to exceed $56,600 for final design and right-of-way easement recording, engineering, construction administration, and project closeout.
So is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Then Joe, will you please time us for the time that we need to wait to see if is anyone who comes in to comment on this?
Sure. And I will put up the public comment instructions that go along with this webinar while I do that. Let me start that timer.
Thank you. And I'll also note that there are funds in, this is coming out of contingency, Todd?
Public Works contingency for URD3, correct?
Right, okay, and there are funds there.
Yes.
And the public comment instructions are on the computer. The phone numbers are not up, Jill, just the instructions for participating, I guess.
Yes, and I think the instructions to phone in are on the agenda. So that's what we're doing with this Zoom webinar version.
All right.
So I think this is assuming that they've followed those instructions. Here's the Zoom webinar instructions to join the webinar on top of the meeting agenda. Maybe Marty should put these on the same page. I think that would be a good idea.
I think that would be a good idea.
We're learning as we go. So
Work in progress.
work in progress. About so I did a 3-minute wait, Nancy. We got less than 2 left.
All right, thank you.
Isn't it Carl that usually does the song and dance between the 2-minute period here?
I know we'll have to tell him that we missed him.
Mhm.
Maybe we should tell him that Todd stepped up to the plate and did the dance for him.
I think Todd's more likely to do a guitar solo.
Well, Carl plays an instrument, which is the trumpet.
Trombone, I think.
Oh, trombone.
He's a big trombone fan, so I assume he plays trombone.
Oh,
When we've been at jazz things together, it's always about the bone. He's
in
a
the
big
brass
trombone
section.
fan.
I'm wearing this headset so you don't hear all the music happening in my house right now. It's working well, I think.
You've got music in your house. Kudos to you. Maybe we need to get funny videos off of social media and broadcast them during these waiting periods.
I would not agree to that.
Very smart.
That seems dangerous.
Well, some of them are just funny. They're not.
Nancy, we're good.
All right, so the motion is before the board. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. And the next item on our agenda then is non-action items. And Jeremy, it looks like, well, I guess, Chris, you have this for the cemetery strategic plan, and then maybe Jeremy has some comments. I'm not sure how you're going to handle this. Please proceed.
I can give it a quick introduction, and then I think Larry and Will Sloan will probably pick it up. Unless Jeremy wants to jump in there. Jeremy kind of helps sponsor and push this thing along. And it's in his department. Well, I guess none of us ever thought about that cemetery was in the Public Works Department, but he's been able to pick up and move along. The north side, or the North Reserve Scott Street Urban Renewal District or area master plan really treaded lightly around the cemeteries, mainly because this both St. Mary and the city cemetery were quite concerned about the master plan and the changes that it was suggesting. They felt like they needed a little bit more time and some more specific work to be able to come up with responses to some of the things that came up during that planning process. Not long after that project was ended, a year or so, the cemetery did a national request for proposals and selected Sloan Consulting to do a strategic plan that looked both in short and long-term needs and make recommendations. Jeremy and I, and from time to time, Ellen attended some of the work that they did. I felt it was done very professionally and from an outsider's view. I don't know the inside of cemeteries at all as far as how they work, other than just being at them. So, I can't speak to that, but it seemed to be very, very well done, and they are certainly well respected in their profession in terms of working with planning for cemeteries, but also running them. I think that the highlights I mentioned in my memo are those that kind of pertain to what MRA could be involved in or be interested in, how that fits into the overall development of the area. I don't think that necessarily, there are a lot of really great, as you saw, recommendations on things that the cemetery could consider in terms of personnel, record keeping, and so on. But I think the main things in terms of buildings and layout and amount of land needed and some of those kind of things, and certain public infrastructure kind of things in terms of separation from the roads and other uses in the area, but we might see those in the future. So I thought they were well described. With that, I think from a staff perspective, I think that the plan works, and for what we need, a cemetery and the city council will have to decide if it works for what they need. I'll pass it on.
Before we hear those additional presentations, maybe I could ask the next Chris for you to answer this question, or the speakers to answer the question. This does have a small conflict with the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan, and is MRA being asked to do anything with the master plan because of that? Or is this I'd just like to know what the status of that is. And it's stated on page 12 of the plan under surplus land evaluation.
Right.
So if you have an answer, Chris, that would be great.
Sure. I think first of all, the master plan actually says, here's what we think that the direction that it could go that could be acceptable, but there needs to be a more specific plan before that, to make sure that we're doing things in conjunction with and in pursuant to the needs of the cemetery that have been researched. So I think we're okay in terms of that's what we're doing. We're saying, okay, our master plan said you need to do more plan, and now we've done more plan.
Oh.
I think we're okay. I will go back and that's a really good question, and I will go back and look at specific language in the master plan to see if there's any need to amend it or just move forward with the cemetery master plan. And we'll make sure that happens if necessary.
All right, thank you. And then are one of you gentlemen going to make a presentation on the plan?
Absolutely, we'd be happy to. First, my name is Will Sloan. It's very nice to meet all of you. I enjoyed very much getting to know the city cemetery and getting to know Missoula a little bit, both through your master plan and also through working with Chris and Jeremy, the cemetery board, and local kind of stakeholders within the cemetery. Larry and I have, if you'll believe it, are cemetery consultants, which is a thing that exists in the world. And we love cemeteries. It's something we really feel passionately about. And we believe you have a beautiful community resource that can only be expanded upon if you choose to. I don't want to be too repetitive because I think Chris's memorandum did a really nice job of summarizing what we talked about. But I thought we'd start by just having Larry give you a little context about our kind of thought process on this, and then I would dive into the land a little bit so you can hear it directly from us, and then we're glad to answer any questions we can.
Yeah, in terms of your interest in the project, the master planning for the cemetery, one of the central questions we were asked is, does the cemetery have adequate land? And if it has adequate land, is there some of that land that may be surplus? And so to put that into context, cemeteries throughout the United States are facing significant headwinds. Their world has changed. And I've been working in cemeteries for over 40 years. That change began in the 1990s in earnest, and it has not subsided. The first very significant change is that a very significant percentage of people are now choosing cremation as a step in the funeral process. So in 1971, when I spent my first day at a cemetery office, the national cremation rate was 3%, and today it's 54%. And no, I didn't predict that growth. In addition to that, we've seen lifestyle changes. So that, we went through a period, particularly in the last 20 years of the last century, where we saw significant divorce rates and fractured families. We have a generation that for the first time has the ability to relocate in retirement. And then we have a generation like ours where my son didn't return to Albany, New York. He lives in Atlanta, and our daughter's in San Francisco. So with all these demographic changes, cemeteries have had a tough time of remaining relevant. And a lot of our clients are historic cemeteries like the city cemetery. And we work very hard to keep them relevant to the community by making them also arboretums, by having tours and historical events at the cemeteries, by having them be an important place for walking, jogging, dog walking, all those things that you can make as a community amenity. So when we come into this, we have that perspective, and specifically in Missoula, you have a state veteran cemetery which offers burial to veterans, their spouses, and dependent children at no cost. You have a very well-run Catholic cemetery, and you have a very well-run for-profit cemetery, which is affiliated with the major funeral home in the community. So the city cemetery is at a significant disadvantage from a marketing perspective, and it's seen decline in its operations. Its market share probably 50 years ago was 85%, and today it's 10%. And so in those contexts, we see that there is certainly excess land in the cemetery. The cemetery board acquired land as a form of investment, as did the Catholic cemetery, trying to merge the two sites together, something that never actually occurred. But there is a lot of excess land there that now can be incorporated into your master planning for that land use on that side of town. I don't know if that sort of gives you a context without getting into all the minutiae of cemetery operations, but we'd be happy to answer questions about that. But I really feel that our analysis is very clear, absolutely crystal clear, that there is excess property at the cemetery.
And just to spend 1 minute, I'm going to dangerously attempt to copy Todd and Chris and share my screen, so we'll see if this works as well. But just to give you a look at this land, because I think it's important to look at it physically. The blue area that you see on the screen is the developed cemetery property today. The left side of the major thoroughfare that goes through is the historic cemetery, specifically this original 14 acres that was a triangular shape off from the railroad that has expanded north. This is the newest development, which is near the office and the maintenance garage. It's a less mature site, as you can see, based on the trees. It's a site that hopefully will slowly start to mirror that left side over time. The green area is an undeveloped area. It is utilized by Public Works. It's utilized for a myriad of things that you can see in our report, in addition to utilities, which are an important part of the cemetery operation in this one spot, which I'll go into. The reality for us as we did our land use analysis, and I'll spend just a moment on that, is that there are 7,000 unused graves in the cemetery today. They are absorbing graves at a rate of 35 per year, which leaves over 200 years of active life. And that is, certainly sufficient given our inability to predict outside of the next 20 years what's going to happen with the cemetery. And so, from our perspective, there is more than enough land that is developed and usable, that entire green area could be used for development that was beyond cemetery purpose. Now, the board will not, and Jeremy will attest to this, may not love me making that statement, but that is just the pure numbers that we've seen in looking at this. As we then went further and looked at your plan, which was really interesting, and Larry and I really enjoyed getting to know the area around it. There is some roadways that are looking to come through the cemetery. And what we kind of came to the conclusion of is, while you could take the entire green area that existed previously, We would recommend that you leave a utility buffer that would allow the pump house, some of the storage that exists at the cemetery, and then a slight corridor. And then you use this orange area for future cemetery development that may be funded out of some of this project. And that's more to keep the cemetery contained and to have it be that unique green space that, while it's surrounded by industry, it's surrounded by, you know, some challenging uses for a cemetery, it's still a very serene place. It's still extremely well maintained. It's still very popular to the community in many ways. And so we're hoping that these slight adjustments can allow that to continue. Larry, I know maybe you want to expand just briefly before we finish on the financial component.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be clear that even portions of the cemetery that have been already laid out could be taken. It was 7,000 spaces and using 35 a year. Obviously, there's significant land that already has been plotted in the area to the north of the orange area. We think, though, it kind of creates an integrity to the site, and it's important that we try to maintain the cemetery for its historical use and to try to keep it as tranquil as possible. And in our report, we recommended a myriad of options for what they should do on the borders to protect it from the current industrial uses. But we feel that, you know, in cemeteries today, obviously a lot of cemeteries have excess land. We're asked regularly to help sell that land for alternative purposes. And when that occurs, you get a windfall. You're getting money. In this case, that's really not the case. The city owns it all, and it's sort of, it's not a typical arrangement where a not-for-profit religious cemetery is selling property. But we're hopeful that a portion of the redevelopment value could be recommitted to the cemetery. The cemetery right now has a chapel that really doesn't function as a chapel. It has an office that was a residence that really doesn't function as an office. And there is no interior columbarium for cremated remains. And so we thought consolidating those three functions, removing those old buildings and building a new building in that orange area that incorporated all those activities could be a tremendous step for the cemetery to make it really a much more viable location and a more user-friendly location as you add other community uses like tours and arboretum and botanical garden type of activities. So we're hoping, and we really emphasize in our report that as your agency and other groups work on this, that they try to keep the cemetery as one of the beneficiaries, not just getting housing to the community, but to try to finish the cemetery in a way that really makes it whole and maintains it as what is really a beautiful site. I mean, the trees in the historic section are just lovely. It's a wonderful place to walk, and it's just hard to get to. But as the green area is developed as residential, there'll be people that actually want to go into that cemetery and have a pathway and connect to, you know, because outdoor activity in Missoula is like the whole thing. I mean, I watched Will walk up to the M. I didn't quite make the hike, but you know, it's just all the paths and trails that are off your city streets. It's so amazing. And to try to incorporate that concept into this area, I think it would be great.
So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions or have anyone add anything to it.
Jeremy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks. Jeremy Keene, Public Works Director. I'd just like to add that, you know, as you know, there's a lot going on in this area, the Scott Street area, and the cemetery strategic plan and also the Public Works facility plan are two of the pieces of that puzzle that help to implement the overall master plan. So we're, like Chris said, we're working forward at that master plan, developing those additional details that we need to understand how to move forward. And we really appreciate MRA's support in helping us do that. Assistance with funding on both of those studies has been super helpful. What's going to happen next is our cemetery board has reviewed the plan and made comments. I believe they'd like to meet one more time in December, and we would take the cemetery board's comments and any comments that your board may have to City Council, most likely in January at this point, and then ask City Council to approve that strategic plan. it is a strategic plan. It's high level and has a lot of suggested tasks and next steps. Those aren't detailed out yet. There will be additional work to do to design those features, figure out the specific details of each one of those. But it gives us a real good direction that helps us both internally with the cemetery and externally with what's happening around it.
Right. Are there any questions from board members? Ruth?
Yes, going back to the map that Will showed that had the orange area for expansion of the cemetery, is the property just below that? Is that the Hutton property that's referred to in the report?
It's a concrete manufacturing facility for burial vaults.
Okay.
It's really an eyesore. We try to at least get them to remove the barbed wire. We don't think anyone wants to break in to steal their burial vaults.
No.
Ruth, yes, that is.
They wouldn't do it, of course, but we asked.
The report
Yes,
referred to the Hutton property though, and I'm wondering what that is.
It is the Hutton property. They do
Okay.
burial vaults, but they do a lot of other custom concrete manufacturing there. Sorry, slabs and a lot of other things. But yes, that's owned by the Hutton.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that for me. I read the report. I thought it was great. I think that a lot of the suggestions are really great. And I'm really glad that the cemetery board agreed to do this strategic planning. I too hope that if the city decides to divest of that excess land, that that a portion of it would be used to implement this strategic plan, including the community center. I like the idea of the Arboretum. I like the idea of opening it up to the public, along with Stories and Stones, to maybe have some bird watching tours, things like that. So I think it's great. I understand that the cemetery board still has some concerns about roads within the cemetery and their historic designation, but I think that those can be worked out going forward.
There's sufficient land not to close roads in the cemetery. The purpose of the road closures is, as consultants, we want to look at eliminating liabilities that have future costs. And with a road, you have to plow it and salt it, and you have to repave it. And if you can get rid of a road and make it grass, we're really good at grass in most cemeteries. We can handle grass. And if you don't have a building, you don't have the roof and all the insurance that goes with it. With the fences, we always look at liabilities to eliminate them, because at some point the cemetery is going to be dormant and there is only taxpayer support. There is not an endowment fund to maintain it in perpetuity. So that's really a cornerstone of what we're looking at. If I remove roads, I eliminate liabilities, and I create very desirable locations for families to purchase burial lots in the old part of the cemetery. And then I also don't have to use land that otherwise could be used for public housing or some other purpose.
Are there other questions or comments?
I have a question for Larry and Will. I'm curious if the dwindling market share that this cemetery has experienced over these past couple of years, do you think that will change just by the finalization of a plan? Do you think there's uncertainty in the market about what's going to happen to the city cemetery, and that is causing fewer families to choose it as an option?
I mean, I don't think the city cemetery is different than many other urban cemeteries. The community is relatively homogeneous. You're having 70% of the community choose cremation as a step in the funeral process today. That's going to grow till 85%. And so what we need to have in the cemetery are relevant places to put cremated remains and to memorialize your loved ones in that cemetery. And part of that is the Arboretum. Part of it is public access. Part of it is having a new center where you can come to the office and have a space to do business and to have a nice chapel instead of a chapel that doesn't function. So all those things kind of tie to try to make it more productive. And then we believe in shared services. So, you're not going to do anything with the State Veteran Cemetery, but you have the Catholic cemetery right up the street. And you have this for-profit that we should be talking to each other about, having a single backhoe between all three cemeteries and try to do things that just make economic sense. And We raised that in a report. We didn't emphasize it because outsourcing can always be controversial, particularly in municipal settings where most of our clients are union municipal workers. In the case of the cemetery workers, they're not union, as the parks is, the public service isn't. So, but we're very sensitive to public employment issues.
Thank you.
I don't know whether that answered your question fully or not, but
Thank you. Well, thank you for presenting the report to us. And Chris said he would take a look at the master plan to see what our expectations were for the area. And Jeremy, once the cemetery board has their final adoption, I guess, of this plan, is that what's coming in your December meeting? That that if there are requests for to MRA for some action to take, that we would look forward to hearing what those are, so that your finalization of the plan would also maybe include even a small part of participation and coordination with the master plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that what we're likely to have, we like Will and Larry said, there are some differences amongst the board and the recommendations in the plan. And so I think what we need to do is make sure that when this goes to council, that those are pointed out and expressed. So the board will probably come out with some final comments on the plans. Whether we actually make changes to the plan or not, I'm not sure at this point, but we'll want to make sure that the council is aware where there are differences in opinion, and then we'll look for the council to endorse that as our plan moving forward, possibly with their own comments or changes to the plan.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda then, our staff reports, director's report. Ellen had a report this month. Thank you.
Had a report month before last too.
Okay. And do you have comments?
Not really. I left a couple of things kind of open in terms of not fleshing out a lot of detail. I think if there are any questions about the work with Six Pony Hitch and the communications plan that Leslie and Jill are kind of taking the lead on, this would be a good time to ask them about that. I know Spider has started interviews. She's done interviews with all of the staff at this point, I think, and we'll probably move on to the board if she hadn't already started that. But I'll defer to Jill and or Leslie to talk about anything they might have to say relative to that.
I can speak to that, Ellen, and you're right on. Spider has completed the interviews with the staff. Before she interviewed the staff, we just did a planning meeting with her briefly, and then she moved into the audit portion of which means she essentially looked through all of MRA's documents, everything that we provided her. A lot of our information is available on our website, which was nice for her to be able to access that. So she is moving now into the phase where she'll be interviewing city council members. And she's been, as she goes through those interviews, she'll be compiling a list of other stakeholders in the community that participants in the interviews that she's done so far have made recommendations to her. So she'll be making a list and, finalizing that so she gets a sense of who she'd like to interview out in the community. She had a little bit of delay getting started due to some family issues, but she's going now and moving fast.
One of the things that I talked with her a fair amount about when she interviewed me the other day is the upcoming session of the legislature and messaging that we may be able to create around TIF and what we've done here that might resonate with some of our newly elected state folks. Because I think it's going to be an interesting legislative session for TIF and for MRA and the other cities and counties that use TIF as a tool.
All right.
Also with the Scott Street redevelopment project, we'll make a referral. The mayor's office is going to make a referral this afternoon to get on city council committee agenda for, I think, the 2nd of December. We've got holidays, et cetera, happening in the interim. We are working on a partnership with a group that wants to redevelop that 9.8 acres that has been cleaned up to residential standards. We stand to gain some pretty impactful, permanently affordable housing as a result of this partnership if we're able to consummate that relationship. And it's a work in progress, but it's being fleshed out right now. Essentially, it would include a component that is ownership, permanently affordable housing, that where the land would be vested with the community land trust. This is the one piece of the puzzle that is most challenging to try to address in terms of housing affordability and our citizens' needs. They will be working at the city, when I say the city's request, they will be working with Opticos, which is a design firm out of California that specializes in what's called missing middle housing. Some of you may have heard about that. It's basically a series of products that don't necessarily exist in our market, and it's kind of a step up way of approaching getting density on a piece of property that's more compatible with what's going on in neighborhoods around it. And we have a very active and supportive, I will say, neighborhood across Scott Street with the North Side neighborhood. But they're also, and legitimately so, they're concerned about impacts of density on their quality of life and on their ability to get in and out of their neighborhoods. And those are some of the things we're going to have to deal with. And I think there will be, folks will be looking to MRA to help solve some of those access issues internally with this development if we're able to move forward with it, and externally in terms of the 200 units that Bellagio is going to put at the end of Scott Street, and Scott Street as being the only primary way in and out of that area. The other piece of this that's really exciting and has literally put a gun to our heads is that this group brings an investor to the table who would take advantage of the opportunity zone, the fact that this land is in an opportunity zone. So there would be a significant investment made through that tool. But we have to have certain things done by the end of December in order for those benefits not to expire under the current regulations. So there's been a whole lot of work done on the part of staff and potential partners to move this forward, and it's going to go very quickly to city council if everything falls into place. And it looks like it's really hopeful looking right now. Chris and I are working with mayor's office, with the outside groups that want to develop it. MEP, you might recall a number of months ago, we allocated funding to the Missoula Economic Partnership to try to attract opportunity zone investment. And they brought this deal to the city and to us. So that investment with MEP may well pay off in spades. I think that was about a $50,000 approval, if I remember correctly, and we're looking at upwards of a $20 million investment as a result of location within the opportunity zone. So that's pretty exciting. Not as exciting for me as Trinity, but it's pretty darn exciting. Other things I think
Well, can I just say, I think it's great that that MEP brought that investor, and I'm glad to see the collaboration between all of the parties on this. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure. Yeah, it's fun to share fun, exciting projects. This one's going to take a fair amount of capacity in a hurry, but if we pull it off, it's going to be well worth it.
Any other items on the director's report?
Any questions?
On the development services realignment, is there a time period when the realignment will be adequately staffed and trained that you will no longer be involved?
Funny you should ask. I sent out an email about that this morning, kind of putting everybody on notice that we need to move forward as quickly as possible with the recruiting to fill the deputy position, at least the one that I'm covering for right now. There will be 2 deputy positions. I think those job descriptions have been crafted and those will be posted anytime now. One of my concerns was, how is this uptick in COVID infections and positive testing going to impact the city's recruiting and onboarding of new staff members? We kind of put everything on hold on the front end of COVID, and there were a lot of departments that had vacancies that they needed to fill, and they couldn't, because how do you bring somebody in and interview them if they're not from here, et cetera, et cetera. What I was told this morning is these 2 recruitments for development services are moving forward unimpeded by COVID, and that there is already, I guess it's already been posted actually, and that there's already a pretty viable candidate pool. So I'm hoping by the first of the year, I'm relieved of those duties.
All right. Any other questions for Ellen? Thank you, Ellen, for the report. And then any comments on budget reports, Jill?
I don't have any comments other than I am working on the FY21 reports, but with the audit and then all the stuff going on this week with the transitioning to the new platform, that I haven't had a chance to get those completely done. But when I do, I will post them up there. This should be your final version of FY20, fairly close. Obviously, you know, they're in the audit right now. So if the auditors have changes to certain things, then those we'll have another final version of those FY20 as far as the audited version. And yeah, other than answer any questions, just moving forward and trying to get things done and get them to the auditors, and we'll get through that process good too.
Thank you.
I can say I had a phone call from Andy Halloran the other day, and they are on schedule to probably open AC Hotel in March. That building is really, it's looking good, and it's going to be a nice addition to that part of downtown.
It looks like it's nearing completion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Radio Central has some action happening on the facade too, right?
Yeah.
I just drove past there. It's exciting to see everything's really coming together downtown in that area.
Well, and you've got that upper floor on Wren. I mean, you talk about visually and aesthetically transforming a street. Holy mackerel, between those 3 projects, and then you throw in Conflux and
the library.
The library, new library is amazing. Rome, you know, pretty exciting what's going on down there.
Higgins Avenue Bridge
so
too.
They are catching up. They're not going to make probably their December goal of being done in December, but they had a hard time getting masons for a while, and now they figured out how to do that safely, and they're moving ahead. You're right. It's looking great.
What project was that, Chris?
That's the Union Block Radio Central.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean, our challenge is going to continue to be the northwest corner of that Main and Patty intersection, known fondly as the CenturyLink building.
Right.
And there's a fair amount of energy around finding a way to work with them to do something about that exterior.
It'd be so fun to convert Front and Main right now when it's not super, super, super busy around there.
Well,
just saying.
I mean, we've already destroyed the traffic patterns there with all the construction. Go ahead, and if we could just come up with the money.
Restripe the lanes, and I know it's a lot more than that, but
the signalized intersections that are the big issue.
Okay. Is there anything else to come before the meeting then? Then meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a nice Thanksgiving. everyone.
Thank
So
you.
nice to see you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your patience with technology, et cetera.
Yes, thank you for your patience.
Thank
Yes.
you, Leslie and Jill, for getting us through it.
Yes. Next month.
Yeah.